The false equivalence: why the LGBT movement and chattel slavery are fundamentally different struggles. The comparison between the LGBT movement and chattel slavery in the United States is a topic that merits serious consideration, and it's critical to acknowledge that while both involve discrimination, oppression, and systemic violence, the two are fundamentally different experiences with distinct histories and societal impacts. Examining this issue through the lens of Project 2025, a political agenda that seeks to undo progressive policies on LGBTQ+ rights, heightens the importance of distinguishing between these two struggles. 1. Historical context and origins. Chattel slavery in the United States is inextricably linked to the transatlantic slave trade, a system designed to dehumanize, commodify, and exploit African people for forced labor. Enslaved individuals were legally considered property, denied any semblance of autonomy, and subjected to systemic brutality for generations. The primary objective of this system was economic. Enslaved Africans built the American economy, contributing to the rise of a powerful nation through their unpaid labor. The LGBTQ+ movement, on the other hand, is centered on the fight for civil rights, identity, and personal autonomy. Its roots lie in a struggle against legal and cultural norms that sought to suppress and pathologize non-heteronormative identities. While the LGBTQ+ community has faced violence, criminalization, and discrimination, their movement has largely been a fight for the recognition of rights and freedoms already afforded to others, including marriage equality, workplace protections, and freedom from persecution. There is no comparison to the physical, generational commodification of an entire race that slavery entailed. 2. Wealth, privilege, and social status. A critical point of divergence between these two movements involves the intersection of wealth and privilege. In the context of the LGBTQ+ movement, it's important to recognize that many who are wealthy and privileged, such as individuals like Caitlyn Jenner, can often insulate themselves from the harshest consequences of anti-LGBTQ+ policies. Jenner, despite being part of the LGBTQ+ community, has the means to avoid the direct impacts of laws targeting transgender or gay individuals by virtue of her wealth and conservative political alignment. This privilege of economic mobility, however, starkly contrasts with the experience of Black Americans during chattel slavery and even in its aftermath, during Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and beyond. The institution of slavery was designed to permanently strip Black people of their humanity, labor, and future opportunities. There was no opting out for the enslaved based on wealth or class because their very existence was bound to a system of exploitation. Even today, generational trauma, systemic racism, and socioeconomic barriers make it impossible to claim that Black Americans can leverage wealth in the same way ultra-rich LGBTQ+ individuals like Jenner can. 3. Experiences of discrimination. Though both communities have faced and continue to face discrimination, the nature of that discrimination differs greatly. Slavery in the U.S. was not just about discrimination, it was a system of ownership and degradation that defined an entire racial group's existence for centuries. The dehumanization and violence experienced by enslaved Black people created generational trauma that is still felt today in the form of systemic racism, mass incarceration, and economic inequality. LGBTQ+ individuals face a different kind of systemic violence and oppression, one rooted in social stigma, religious conservatism, and institutionalized homophobia and transphobia. However, LGBTQ+ individuals who are not Black may have privileges that Black Americans, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, do not. For example, a white gay man may face discrimination due to his sexual orientation, but still benefits from the privileges that come with his race. In contrast, a Black LGBTQ+ person faces dual layers of discrimination, one based on race, the other on sexual orientation or gender identity. 4. Project 2025, Diverging Consequences for Different Groups. Under policies like those proposed in Project 2025, it becomes even clearer that class and race will dictate the impact of discriminatory laws. Project 2025's push for regressive LGBTQ+ policies will disproportionately affect those who lack the resources to protect themselves. For non-Black, wealthy LGBTQ+ individuals like Caitlyn Jenner, access to wealth means the ability to mitigate these effects, whether by moving to more progressive states, accessing top-tier legal support, or simply living in a manner that shields them from the worst repercussions. Poor LGBTQ+ individuals, especially those who are Black, cannot simply escape discriminatory legislation. For example, if anti-trans laws intensify, Black transgender individuals, who already face higher rates of violence, homelessness, and poverty, will be even more vulnerable. Meanwhile, white LGBTQ+ individuals with wealth may be able to relocate or avoid much of the systemic discrimination that will likely follow under Project 2025. 5. Rhetoric versus reality. It's important to highlight that many non-Black LGBTQ+ individuals may claim their struggle is analogous to that of Black Americans under slavery without fully comprehending the profound differences between racial oppression and the fight for LGBTQ+ rights. The idea that both movements are the same fails to recognize the centuries of systemic, race-based dehumanization Black people experienced in the U.S. In a thought experiment where non-Black LGBTQ+ individuals are asked if they would body swap with a Black person for a day to experience what it's like to be both Black and LGBTQ+, the likely reluctance speaks volumes. Many might acknowledge the compounding challenges of racism and queerphobia without ever having to experience it themselves, underscoring that while LGBTQ+ individuals can face severe discrimination, racial identity adds an extra dimension of oppression that wealth or status often cannot mitigate. Conclusion. While both the LGBTQ+ movement and the historical struggle against slavery involve the fight for rights and recognition under oppressive systems, they are not the same. Chattel slavery was a racialized system of exploitation, control, and dehumanization that remains unparalleled in American history. The LGBTQ+ movement, while deeply important and necessary, does not carry the same historical or economic weight. Under political frameworks like Project 2025, the divergences between these two experiences become even more evident. Wealth and privilege may allow some LGBTQ+ individuals to shield themselves from the impacts of regressive policies, but Black Americans, especially poor Black LGBTQ+ individuals, are far more vulnerable to the compounded effects of both racial and LGBTQ+ discrimination. The struggles of these groups must be understood on their own terms, recognizing the distinct experiences of race, class, and identity that shape them.